Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you, that's right, you, to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. You know the drill, folks. Pull up that chair, take a seat. Tonight, I am talking about Bright, Netflix's brand new original movie starring Will Smith, Joel Edgerton, directed by David Ayer, written by Max Landis. This was the movie that Netflix was hoping could establish that blockbuster feel they've been looking for, right? This was going to be their home run in the blockbuster department. Finally get their movies on track with their TV stuff, right? Everyone loves their television catalog. Not a lot of people like their movie catalog. I was hoping that this was going to be the blockbuster home run they've been looking for. One of those movies that feels like it should be on the big screen. How is this on Netflix, right? I saw the trailer for this and I got psyched. I was like, whoa, how is this with these actors and this group of people not on the big screen? You see it feels more like a Netflix than a big screen movie. That's definitely one thing to talk about. It feels Netflix. It doesn't feel like a big production. Even though it's got a $90 million budget, I think they shot this with low budget expectations. A lot of the other money went to the writer, the director, some of the actors. But it was one of these things. I saw the preview, man. I was like, yes, this is gonna be awesome. It looked. There's no way that this isn't gonna work. Will Smith, this is right up his alley, man. Like a buddy cop movie with an orc. That's so fascinating. We're gonna mesh the fantasy realm with the real world, put it all together. We're gonna have orcs and elves living simultaneously with humans. It's gonna be cool. There seems to be some interesting stuff here. It looks like there's gonna be some awesome action. Oh man, I thought it was gonna be a home run. I can't say that it's a home run because it's not. It's not. Critics are thrashing this. They're completely dismissing it altogether. I don't think that's fair at all. For me, this movie is a mixed bag. And it's almost a perfect half of a mixed bag, right? You know me, I like to start my reviews with the bad and end with the good. And that's basically, for me, what this movie does. It starts out really not good. There's a lot of bad stuff in the first 40 minutes or so of this movie. But it ends, I think, really strong, and I think it leaves a good taste in the viewers' mouths. And I think audiences are being more receptive to this movie than critics. So let's jump into the bad, and I gotta hang it on Max Landis and David Ayer, man. David Ayer just keeps making the same movie over and over again. It just keeps getting worse each time he does it. Max Landis, he comes from the comic book world, and he's given us some interesting movies. Chronicle, I thought, was really cool. American Ultra, and I think some of that has to do with being able to adapt the way you write when you're thinking about a comic book with something that's got to be more mainstream in the movie community. I don't think Max Landis has really figured that out yet. And he definitely tried to do too many things in the first 40 minutes. This movie doesn't know what it wants to be in the first half. It's pitched like a buddy cop movie that ultimately ends up being a buddy cop movie, but the first half is more like a non-buddy cop movie. Will Smith plays Darryl Ward, who is a cop on the LAPD. Joel Edgerton plays Nick Jacoby, who is the first orc in the LAPD, and they are partners. He is the diversity hire. They refer to him as that a bunch in the movie. We'll get to some of the problems with all of that stuff. But yeah, these two guys get put together and they don't really seem to get along. Mostly because Will Smith doesn't seem to trust him, doesn't really seem to like him. Jacoby seems to be wanting to be buddies with Will Smith. In the movie's history, and this is a non-spoiler review, but there's going to be mild spoilers throughout. I'm going to try not to do too many spoilers, but I do got to touch on some certain things. And one of them is, Joel Edgerton in the orc community. They talk about being blooded. He's not a blooded orc. His sharp, long teeth that come out from the bottom are shaved down. So he's essentially an outcast in the orc community, which poses an interesting dynamic, which you would think would work with Will Smith, who is a black cop on the LAPD. Which, in our history, the LAPD with, the black community has not always been very good. I mean, we know this, and there's actually a scene in this movie that is reminiscent of Rodney King. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 cops beating the living crap out of an orc as Jacoby and Ward drive by. And it doesn't seem to affect Will Smith whatsoever. Definitely seems to be hitting Jacoby a little bit, but not too hard. Like I said, he's an outcast from his own community. And that's the weird thing in this movie. There's a very strong racist and racism elements in this movie towards orcs. And the thing that's strange for me is it almost feels as if the orc struggle has completely replaced the black struggle in America. Almost as if Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, like none of that ever happened. Which is very, very strange, because the thing that you would think would make these two characters, sympathize and get along, is that struggle of, wanting to be equal. And you don't get that feel at all from Will Smith. It feels like he's always been an equal person in this world. And that's an odd thing to do. And I was watching it with my family, and Mom was like, well, maybe it's just the orcs are like, they're the outcasts in general in society, and the elves are kind of outcasts too, but they're super, super rich, right? They're the 1%. I was like, okay, maybe that's true. But then Jay Hernandez shows up, playing a sheriff in L.A., in a standoff with a crazy homeless man who has a sword. And when Jacoby and Ward show up, he kind of makes a comment, I think to Jacoby, where he's like, hey, man, like, I get you, man. Like, they're still trying to put the Alamo on us, So there definitely seems to be that feel for minority racism in general. But the black community, it seems to have been completely replaced by the orcs. I think that's just stupid. I love the idea of meshing the two worlds, but why are we going to rewrite our own history? Especially when that history offers so many elements into a character. And it could have been the thing that resolved the non-buddy stuff, right? Like, even if Will Smith doesn't trust completely Joel Edgerton's character because of what happens at the beginning of the movie, seeing the way people are treating him so unjustly, and just seeing the way people are treating orcs in general, you'd think that would hit Will Smith, and it doesn't. And I just don't agree with that at all. So like I said, the first half of this movie, it's trying to do too many things, right? It's trying to talk about social injustice, and it's trying to sort of eventually slowly resolve whether or not these two main characters are ever going to get along. It's trying to build this whole hatred of the cops towards this one diversity hire. He's already an outcast in the world. Now he's an outcast within the cop community, and he's just trying to do the right thing. And they're doing all this stuff, and it's just too much. It takes too long, and it prevents us from getting where we need to get going, which is the real story, right? In the movie, the actual story that we really gravitate towards and is the main plot is an elf named Tika, played by Lucy Fry, steals a wand. Wands are like super, super hard to come by. They're very, very valuable, but only brights can touch wands, and usually brights are elves. And if you're a human, the only way to know if you're a bright is to touch a wand. And if you touch a wand with your bare hand and you're not a bright, you burst into dust, basically. So the only way to know is if you grab it barehanded. No one ever wants to do that because there's no other way to know. So Lucy Fry steals this wand away from Layla, who's played by Noomi Rapace, who is fantastic. And she's trying to keep it away from her because Noomi Rapace and her gang of elves want to raise the Dark Lord. Right? So now here's all the fun fantasy stuff, right? Like, boom, this is what our real story is. And it takes way too long to get on that track. Get the train on that track. It takes too long. And David Ayer just doesn't put together a good movie in the first half. He does some really good things in the second half. There's some awesome action sequences, and the Will Smith and Joel Edgerton relationship works a lot better in the second half. But trying to do all the other stuff at the beginning, I didn't think it was necessary. You could have established, Jacoby being an outcast. You could have established, some of the racist stuff, but it's so heavy and so prevalent at the beginning. It's like, okay, what are we trying to say? And then we never really come back around to that come the second half of the movie. The first half just doesn't work for me. And I feel like I'm starting to talk myself probably into circles because the first half of the movie makes my mind go around in circles. It just, so many times you were just like, why didn't we bail out of this earlier? Why didn't we get going? Especially when you watch the second half of this movie. So let's get to the good parts. And there's some good stuff in here, and it starts with the actors. The actors in this movie are excellent. Will Smith, we get classic Will Smith. I've been waiting for classic Will Smith. I didn't think I was going to see classic Will Smith until Bad Boys 3. He is so on point in this movie. Man, he is hard-nosed and, tough when he has to be. He takes charge when he needs to, and he is funny when he needs to, man. When you need to cut that tension a little bit, Will Smith, boom, he's going to land it. Joel Edgerton, for me, is the best thing in this movie. Let me say it again, folks, because I know lots of Will Smith fans out there, because I'm one of them. Joel Edgerton is the best thing in this movie. You really believe Joel Edgerton is an orc. He sat in 3+ hours of makeup every day, practical makeup. We're not doing CGI stuff. He's awesome. You feel his pain. You feel his excitement. Everything that he's feeling, you feel along with him better than probably any character in the movie. And once we get to the second half, and this movie gets going, and him and Will Smith start to find common ground, and it starts to actually be a buddy cop movie come the second half. Oh, so good. Their chemistry on screen is so good. I really enjoyed watching the two of them together on screen. I want more of the two of them together. I believe that a sequel was greenlit, and that makes me think one other thing that we have to talk about that was not so good is this Dark Lord character. He is hinted at through the whole movie. It opens with all sorts of graffiti and stuff, and you see Dark Lord spreading there all over the place. Lore is talked about in this movie a lot, and the Dark Lord is a big part of the lore of this world. Anumi Rapace's group is the group that is supposed to be raising him. That's why she wants her wand back, so she can raise the Dark Lord to take over the Earth. We hint at him a ton in this movie, and we never get anywhere near him. Numi Rapace and her group don't ever get a chance to start doing something. He never shows up, and it's this trope in movies that just keeps happening over and over, where you write a movie and you just expect it to get a sequel. And I think Netflix has greenlit a sequel, but when you get really bad critical reviews, the way this movie is getting, that's not a foregone conclusion. That could come off the table if Netflix decides to do so. We've seen some of their good shows have that happen to them. So anything's possible. If you're gonna hint that much at something, you've got to give me a payoff, and there's no payoff with that character. Which brings me back to Numi Rapace, who's awesome in this movie, but because we get so bogged down with the first half, we can't even introduce her until the second half. And she and her elf gang are awesome, man. They're so badass. They are scary villains. They're super fast. They're hand-to-hand awesome. They're acrobatic. They're beautiful on screen. I wanted more Numi Rapace, and we could have had more if we weren't messing around with what we were messing around with in the first half. But she's fantastic. All the actors that show up in this movie are great. One other guy, Brad William Henke, when you see his face, you know exactly who he is if you're not familiar with the name. And the voice is also very, very noticeable. He is an orc in this movie. You don't even know it's him. Like I said, the orc makeup in this movie is brilliant. And he is the head of a gang, and he's fantastic. He has some really funny moments, and it's one scene, and he makes you laugh. He certainly puts some fear into you, and he brings some awesome elements in his scene. And as I also mentioned, Lucy Fry playing Tika, she doesn't have a lot. She's in the movie the whole second half, but they don't give her a ton to do. She's mostly running away most of the time. But when she is on screen and when she does do stuff, she's awesome. So like I said, it feels very much, since we're talking about David Ayer, it feels kind of like Suicide Squad, right? We have such a good, strong foundation because of the characters. The characters in the movie are really good. The world that we're building, I think, is a really solid foundation for more movies, for more places to explore. I like this concept of mashing up fantasy and reality. And it pays off in the second half. There's some great action in the second half. We get a cool car chase. We get a couple cool shootouts. We definitely get some good, solid tension toward the climax of the movie. And like I said, it ends leaving a good taste in your mouth. I think they handle the end of the movie way better than the first half. It's extremely enjoyable once you get into the second half. And not that everything in the first half of the movie is bad. There's some good things in there. There's some funny moments. There's a little bit of action, but they got too mixed up in some stuff, in some of the stuff that I talked about earlier. If they would have just focused on the storyline that we got in the second half and expanded that out for 2 hours, I mean, we could have probably gotten to the Dark Lord, which could have led to some cool things. There's some cool imagery in the second half of this movie when we're in the orc world and when we're in the elf world. There's so many cool things. I love a lot of the elements of this movie. I just wish it would have all come together a little bit better. So that's all I've got, guys. That is it. I can't talk. If I keep going, I'm going to spoil this movie. I don't want to do that because I think it's worth a watch. I want you guys to see this movie. I want you to watch it if you haven't. I think a lot of people have. Like I said, the audience reviews and the audience scores seem to be trending way better than the critics. I think 11 million something people watched this movie in the first couple days. So hopefully that's a good sign. If people are watching, however that makes Netflix money, I hope we get a sequel because I think this is a really cool world to dive into. So with that being said, let me know what you thought. Hit those comments below, please. Tell me if you liked the movie, if you didn't like the movie, what was good and bad. How did I do? Was I on point? Was I off point? Let me know where I was either with you or not with you. Everyone has their own opinions, and I like to know all of them. So hit those comments, let me know. If you haven't seen the movie, have I enticed you enough to want to get through the first 40 minutes to see what I think is a really cool second half of a movie? I hope I have. I hope I left a good taste in your mouth. I hope you guys see this movie. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. I love getting thumbs up from you guys. If you're not part of the squad, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And as always, once you subscribe, hit that bell so you get alerts every time I make a new video. For the Seaman Cinema Sit Down, we've gotten through Bright. My name is the Seaman, and I am signing off.